Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Good to see you. I know I'm probably interrupting your viewing of the DNC. Everyone's very excited about it. It's been an electric, star-studded event, or at least that's what the notifications I'm getting on my phone from various news entities would have me believe. And I'll talk about that in a future video whenever I contrast those with the RNC next week. Because what I've been doing is taking screen caps of, because I have NBC and NPR and CNN and all these different groups on my phone, these news apps, and I've been taking screenshots of just my notifications daily, like the heading of these different ones. And I want to contrast them with the coverage of the RNC next week. I'm sure it will be the same. I'm sure there'll be the same wall-to-wall enthusiasm and excitement about the RNC, but just in case I'm wrong, I have it for the contrast, just in case. So anyway, so I'm sorry to interrupt your viewing of that, as I'm sure that you totally were doing. But I wanted to make a video kind of about Kamala Harris, but also kind of not. So I don't know about you, but I was kind of surprised when Biden picked her as his running mate. I remember, so I was sending out like tweet GIFs. Basically, all of the GIFs I sent out were from that old YouTube video. You are so dumb. You are really dumb. Because I was like, this is the stupidest pick. Why would he do this? And basically, every person who isn't significantly on the left that I follow said the same thing. Like, this is a dumb pick. This doesn't make any sense, and all this other stuff. But one thing I've really tried to cultivate in my own just kind of introspection and internal reasoning is to, if I immediately think something is dumb, but a lot of thought probably went into it, to go back and second guess myself there. So I did the same thing whenever Trump was elected, right? Like, that's his election kind of put me on the journey that I've been on for the last several years, which is he was elected. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. This is really dumb. This is crazy. But then I'm like, well, wait a second. What are the odds that it's dumb versus the odds of there being something that I don't know or don't understand? And I realized that, of course, it's more likely that there's something I don't understand, or I don't have the whole picture here. And so that's where I started to investigate, what did I miss? And anyway, but with Kamala Harris, I had the same thought. I'm like, okay, there's probably been more thought put into this VP pick than any other VP pick. I mean, think about it. Like, this election, this candidate, Joe Biden, right? I mean, the VP pick here is more important, arguably, than virtually any other VP pick they could have. So if my first thought is, that's really stupid, and I have all these criticisms that come to mind, what are the odds that the people who made this selection didn't also factor those things in? It's very small. It's very small. So a few of the things that I thought of, so what I did was I made a list of what are the reasons why I think she's a bad pick. And what I realized is a lot of the reasons why I thought she was a bad pick, why I thought this is so dumb, either don't matter anymore or are no longer applicable. And so I'll get into some of those. But so if you were like me and you were confused, I kind of want to talk about that. And I'm going to tell you right now that this video is just kind of an assessment of things. I'm not putting a judgment. This isn't me talking about how great Kamala Harris is or how bad Mike Pence or Donald Trump is or anything like that. I'm just saying, here is my basic assessment of where it stands and kind of where these two candidacies and campaigns are right now as a result. So one of the first things why I thought that Kamala Harris was a bad pick was because she doesn't stand for anything. Like, I didn't think she was very likable during the primaries. One of the, all the articles at the end when she was flaming out and then when she like dropped out of the race were about how she couldn't get a message together. She couldn't build a message. No one knew what she stood for. And that was one of the things that worked against her. Well, a theme you'll find is that a lot of the things that were working against her during the primaries aren't applicable here because of the contrasts are different. So Kamala Harris having to build a message that makes her distinct from the other candidates in the Democratic primary is not the same as her being compared to Mike Pence and Donald Trump, which is the situation she's in now. And so she doesn't have to build a message. She doesn't have to have a message. She doesn't even have to stand for anything. That's already been established for her. She just has to come and do two things: cheerlead Joe Biden and Joe Biden's what he stands for, what his message is, and be non-threatening. That's all she has to do. That doesn't work in the primaries. It works here in the VP position. And we're going to look at how she does at both of those things here in a minute. But my point is that she didn't have a platform before. Well, that doesn't really matter, because now she can just she just has to co-opt and cheerlead Joe Biden and his platform. So that takes care of that. The comparisons are different because it's against Donald Trump and Mike Pence. That's very different than when she's compared to people who are much more authentic than she is, like Bernie Sanders or Andrew Yang, for example. So that's a difference right there. You know, Kamala Harris is not someone who I think is very likable. I don't think she has, again, I don't think she has any principles that she stands for, but she doesn't have to now. And in terms of the likability thing, there's a lot of people that don't come across as likable. You know, during the 2016 Republican primaries leading up to that election, you know, Ted Cruz was constantly compared to like the Zodiac killer. You know, he was not likable. Ted Cruz was not likable at all. Like, no matter how you feel about the guy now, he wasn't likable then. I didn't like him very much then. I'm like, this guy is not likable. Like, he seems like he would be played by like an iguana in a movie or something like that if there's an animal version of it. But guess what? He's worked on it. He's super likable now. He's learned to let some of his personality out. He grew a beard. He does that show with Michael Knowles. And I think he's a lot more likable now. So that's something, that's not a static state of being. It's dynamic. And how authentic and likable she has to appear now is very different, because she's not being compared again to people that are much more likable and authentic, like Andrew Yang or Bernie Sanders. She's just being compared to Mike Pence and Donald Trump. So the standards are now a little bit lower. No matter, again, how you feel about any of those people, I'm just saying that it's a different metric. Like, the metrics are different. Another thing is that it's going to be very difficult for them to, they can't criticize her. Like, the criticisms that were really effective against her in the primaries aren't effective now because of who she is. I mean, we've already seen this, but every criticism is laid out as being racist or sexist. You know, this is just Donald Trump. This is how he speaks to women of color or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that it's genuine. I don't think those are good arguments against criticisms, but that's the game that they play, and they will play that game. They will play that game. So the criticisms against her aren't going to work near as much. And we'll get into an example of where I think it's really not going to work here in a second. But the other thing is they don't really have a way, like, some of the criticisms against her from the left don't work from the right. So think back to, you know, people always have now been referencing whenever Tulsi Gabbard totally, you know, just, you know, finish her, KO, you know, took her out during the debates. Well, the attack was something having to do with law enforcement. And that might work from the left, you know, where there's, you know, law enforcement being tough on crime is especially during a Democratic primary, isn't something that's going to go over super well with all of the people voting in that primary. But that is not an effective criticism from the right, you know, especially right now. Think about this. One of the things that Trump and Pence are campaigning on, that they're going to continue to campaign on, is lawlessness in these Democratic cities, how it's been overrun with chaos. Well, she kind of, her and Joe Biden's, you know, crime reform bill in the 90s, they have removed the right's monopoly on being law and order. Because we have, again, Joe Biden did that crime bill in the 90s that he now, you know, has apologized for. And she was a prosecutor. So they can say, no, we do care about crime. We do care about law and order. Look at our two candidates here. So they've removed that as a criticism as well. And again, I think that she appears largely non-threatening now because of who she's compared to. But let's go back, and first we're going to look at some stuff of Pence talking about. So I want to compare her to Pence. And one of the reasons why I want to do that is because she's going to be debating Mike Pence. There's only one debate for the vice presidents, and that's who she's going to be debating, is Mike Pence. And so, like, I think that there's a good chance that the clips from the Pence-Harris debate will have more, will be more widespread and more shared and be more of a news thing than the Trump-Biden debates. Now, one thing I've said before, and I still think is true, is I think there's a good chance they fact check, you know, I use that very loosely, but fact check Donald Trump in real time during those debates. And if that's the case, then who knows? But either way, I kind of want to look at what her comparison is going to be here. So again, we're not talking about Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard, or people that would have appeared more likable and more authentic during the debate or during the primaries, this is who she's going to be contrasted with. And to be totally frank, I like Mike Pence. I actually think Mike Pence is a very likable and honorable guy. But Kamala Harris is ruthless. She's a ruthless demagogue, and she's willing to say virtually anything in a debate. I mean, she referenced that, Colbert interviewed her and said, well, wait a second, after she was announced as the VP, and said, well, wait a second, you called this guy racist during the debates. How are we supposed to basically price that in? How should we look at that now? And she's laughing like it was a debate. It was a debate. It's like, okay, during that time, you're portraying him as someone who was opposed to you getting an education, and he was a brutal racist. And you're willing to say that to someone who's on your side now that you're cheerleading. Like, what is she going to do to Mike Pence? What is she going to do to Mike Pence? So again, I like Mike Pence, but I think that he's in a lose-lose situation against Harris, especially if he adopts some of the strategies and rhetoric that he's about to say here. So Shapiro just asked him, this is maybe a week ago, a little less than a week ago. Shapiro just asked him, what do you think about, like, how important is the vice president in this election compared to other elections? Like, in other elections, they don't matter as much, but because Joe Biden's called himself a transitional candidate, like, how important is it here? And listen to what Mike Pence says. I think this is a mistake.
I don't think that's the case this time. Biden has declared himself a transitional figure in the Democratic Party. By picking Kamala Harris, he's essentially said that he himself is a Trojan horse for Kamala Harris's ideology. 60% of Americans, according to a Rasmussen poll, are suspicious that Biden will not even finish his first term. How important do you think his VP pick actually is to the American people? Should it matter?
Well, I think Joe Biden's agenda of the radical left confirmed in his selection of someone who was recognized as the most liberal member of the United States Senate in 2019.
So, yeah, we're going to pause there. Okay. So first off, Bernie Sanders is a senator. Elizabeth Warren is a senator. For Pence to pivot and first say Kamala Harris is the most radical senator, and I don't know what he's referencing there. I think that I've heard someone else make this reference that she's the most radical senator. I've heard Ben Shapiro say that. That's a mistake, because I'm not someone who particularly likes Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, but to immediately pivot to she's the most radical candidate is a mistake, because that tells me they would have said that no matter who the VP was, because obviously Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are more radical than Kamala Harris. That's obviously true. And so the fact that they're saying that's like, okay, wait a second, who are you talking to here? Like, that raises red flags for me, because again, I'm inclined to not be supportive of virtually anything that Kamala Harris is going to want to put forth. But if the premise is she's the most radical senator, you've lost me. You've lost me. Now, one thing he could do is say Joe Biden and Kamala Harris don't really stand for anything. But what they've allowed themselves to do is be stuck in a position where they have to pay lip service to people who really do believe these things. I don't think Joe Biden or Kamala Harris really believe these positions. I don't think they really want to do all the radical things that they're paying lip service to. But the fact that they're paying lip service to it is a problem. And the fact that they don't care about paying lip service to it is a problem, because again, I don't think it's what they believe, but that just tells me they don't believe anything. I think that's a much more effective strategy than saying, well, she's the most radical person. And what he's about to say is what I think he should have said.
Is the real issue here, Ben. I really believe that. If you want to know what Joe Biden is planning to transition us to in this country, you need to look no further than the unity agenda that he and Bernie Sanders unveiled about a month ago.
That is true. I've looked over the agenda. In fact, I've got a text message because I'm still on, I guess, voter list to get campaign updates from previous Bernie Sanders campaign, because I voted for him in the primaries last time around. It was a long time ago. But they were saying, whenever I told them I'm undecided, they said, well, Joe Biden will bring us the most progressive presidency we've seen since FDR. Joe Biden himself said that in a live stream with Bernie Sanders after Sanders dropped out of the primaries, out of the race. And so I think there are some effective attacks you could, but I don't think you have to say something this hyperbolic because it loses people. And maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe, you know, you hear that and go, well, she is. Maybe. I don't think so. Again, I think they could say, Joe Biden doesn't believe in anything other than, you know, he prefers creamy peanut butter over crunchy peanut butter. That's pretty much it. And Kamala Harris showed during the primaries that she doesn't believe in anything. She doesn't have a position. She just will say whatever she has to say to have power. She adopted multiple positions on healthcare. She's talked about tech censorship, and she's had multiple positions on law enforcement and gun control and all these other things. And one of the reasons why she was such a failure as a candidate was because she didn't believe in anything. But that's the problem, is you have two people who don't really believe in anything, and they're getting influenced by people who really do believe in this stuff. I think that's a much more effective strategy than to try and say that level of hyperbole. So I don't think that's going to work, contrasting Pence with Harris. What Pence is saying there, again, I think is hyperbole, and I don't know who it's going to land with. And I want to go to another part of this interview where he kind of reiterates this and says what his strategy will be for actually being able to go up against Kamala Harris. Again, I think this is a mistake.
We're gonna deal with the facts every single step of the way, and look, the media is going to do what the media is going to do. I have to tell you, I was chuckling the other day when I heard that the New York Times had done a story describing the most liberal member of the United States Senate as a moderate, as a pragmatic moderate, and then you saw newspapers and also you know, their adherents on a couple of the major cable networks repeating the same language. But look, I think it kind of reminds me of what Groucho Marx said years ago. He said, "Who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes?" Right?
So Ben had asked him, every criticism is going to be portrayed as racist. Every criticism is going to be portrayed as sexist, whatever. You know, what are you going to do about this? And he says, well, we're just going to stick with the facts. Now, facts are important, obviously, but they're obviously not the only thing. If facts were the only thing, then we wouldn't have a lot of the policies we have today. So I don't think that this is going to be an effective strategy for Mike Pence against Kamala Harris. And again, I like Mike Pence. I think Mike Pence seems like a genuinely good guy. I remember whenever John Oliver did this thing a couple of years ago, attacking Mike Pence as this vicious homophobe and horrible person. I remember I was listening to it while I was driving. I was so angry I had to pull over because I'm like, this is just completely unwarranted. So I like Mike Pence, but I don't think this is going to be an effective strategy against Kamala Harris. She's not the most liberal senator. I think that she's a chameleon. She's a political chameleon. She'll say whatever she has to say. And I think that's a much more effective strategy. You could say, again, these people don't believe in anything, but they've got a lot of people who are true believers, like, you know, Bernie Sanders and his group, who are shaping a lot of our policy here. And that's who they're listening to. You know, with us, you know what we believe. You know what, you've seen it over the last 4 years. You might like it, you might hate it, you might be neutral to it, but at least you know what we believe and you know what to expect. These people don't believe in anything, so they're vulnerable to being captured by the loudest, most radical voices within their coalition, and that's a problem. That's a problem. So I think that'd be an effective strategy for Mike Pence. And again, I want to contrast him. So this is him whenever he was debating Tim Kaine, who was Hillary Clinton's running mate. Now, one thing that's immediately apparent is there's not much of a contrast. I know this is an identity politics thing, but this is how it's going to be portrayed. I'm only doing an analysis here of how things seem and how they're going to be portrayed. I'm not putting a moral judgment on it. I hate identity politics, so I guess I am. I think that it's bad. But people saw Mike Pence and Tim Kaine as just two old white guys, okay? Now, this is during the debate that they had then, obviously, and you don't see much of a difference between the two. And this is a question about police brutality and bias and law enforcement issues, because during this time, again, we had the rise of Black Lives Matter. We had Philando Castile. Things like that were very much on the forefront. So they were asked a question about bias in policing. Like, obviously, this question is going to come up again. Listen to how Mike Pence answers this and how this exchange goes between him and Tim Kaine here.
Whenever there's a loss of life because of police action, But Senator, please, enough of this seeking every opportunity to demean law enforcement broadly by making the accusation of implicit bias every time tragedy occurs.
Elaine, people shouldn't be afraid to bring up issues of bias in law enforcement. And if you're afraid to have
I'm not afraid to bring that up.
If you're afraid to have the discussion, you'll never solve it.
And they get in, they talk about Philando Castile, and there's multiple times where Pence interrupts Kaine, and actually the moderator allows Mike Pence to finish. Tell me that the way that Mike Pence handles that question there is going to be as effective against Kamala Harris. Just as a fact, okay? Like, I'm not saying I hate it. I hate that's where we are. But that's what, James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian, then they talk about standpoint epistemology. The way a lot of these things end up being framed as, well, as a woman or as a person of color or as an old white guy or whatever, my experience is X. She's going to destroy Mike Pence. She's going to destroy Mike Pence in that debate. She just is. He's not going to have an answer. And if he goes with, you're so radical or you're the most radical, I don't think it's going to be an effective strategy. And so Mike Pence's previous opponent, Tim Kaine, who remembers who Tim Kaine is? Like, he was a joke. Kevin from Engineering Politics and I, whenever we've had some live streams together or done some videos together, he's referenced Tim Kaine. I think the first time he did, I was laughing so hard because I'm like, who remembers who Tim Kaine is? Like, no one remembers Tim Kaine. Now imagine Kamala Harris next to Mike Pence. It's going to be a clear distinction just because she's a woman, he's a man. He's white, she's not. And it's going to help further flesh out the distinctions that they're going to try and draw out between their two campaigns. And so my first point is, my first point is that a lot of the things that made her a bad candidate during the primaries don't really matter right now because of the contrast and because of the issues that were inherent to the primary that don't exist now. And so the second point was the contrast is Mike Pence. And if Mike Pence tries to say, well, we're just going to stick to the facts, I don't think that's going to be as effective of a strategy as to deal with sentiments and how people feel about things right now. And those can be rooted in facts. You can use facts to support that. But if he just says that, I think he's going to get smoked. And the contrast just between him and Tim Kaine is going to be very different. And I think the moderators are going to be more hostile to Mike Pence than they were during this debate. And so that's going to be a factor as well. So that's another point. But let's look at what she does have to do. Again, she doesn't have to present herself as a distinct candidate or as this really unique and vibrant, kind of thing like she did in the primaries. She just has to do two things: cheerlead Joe Biden and him as a candidate and his platform, and appear non-threatening. Those are the two things she has to do. So I want to look at this clip from whenever he announced her as his running mate, and tell me that this is not that she's not effective here as a cheerleader for Joe Biden and someone who seems non-threatening and can gain empathy. Again, I say this as someone who believes Kamala Harris is not a likable person. She seems exactly like Hillary Clinton, just a kind of a younger version of Hillary Clinton. Like maybe she's, learned a few of, she's improved on the way that Hillary Clinton came across during her presidential run or her last one. But fundamentally, Kamala Harris seems very much like Hillary Clinton because of just, she's nothing. She just represents whatever she thinks people want her to represent. But in terms of being an effective cheerleader for Joe Biden and seeming non-threatening and gaining empathy here from people, let's look at how she does in this short clip.
And let me just tell you about Beau Biden. I learned quickly that Beau was the kind of guy who inspired people to be a better version of themselves. He really was the best of us.
Beau Biden it was Joe Biden's dead son, his son who died of cancer, by the way.
And when I would ask him, where'd you get that? Where did this come from? He'd always talk about his dad. And I will tell you, the love that they shared was incredible to watch.
Watch Joe Biden right here and tell me this is not an empathetic moment.
It was the most beautiful display of the love between a father and a son.
That's Joe Biden trying not to cry because Kamala Harris is talking about his dead son. Like, say whatever you want about how inauthentic she is and doesn't believe anything, and how inauthentic Joe Biden is, and he doesn't believe in anything. I mean, mostly Joe Biden's just trying to figure out where the creamy peanut butter is because he doesn't like eating the crunchy, and trying to remember where the bathroom is. But that's him as a man who's lost his son, and Kamala Harris knew his son. Tell me that that's not an effective moment right there. Like, no parent should have to lose their kid. No parent. I mean, I get emotional even thinking about it. So that right there, that is effective. That is effective.
And Bo talked about how Joe would spend 4 hours every day riding the rails back and forth from Wilmington to Washington so he could make breakfast for his kids in the morning and make it home in time to tuck them in bed each night. All of this so 2 little boys who had just lost their mom and their sister in a tragic accident would know that the world was still turning.
So again, my point here is what Kamala Harris had to do during the primaries was have her own distinct platform, have her own distinct brand of leadership, all these other things. The vice president is very different. You have to cheerlead the president and what they stand for and make people really want to get behind them. And in this case, I think she has to appear non-threatening. I think those are the two. This is very different than her telling Elizabeth Warren she needs to, join her calls for Twitter to remove Donald Trump's account like she did during the primaries. She said a lot of things that were incredibly off-putting during the primaries, like super duper off-putting. And she didn't stand for anything. So that's why she failed and flamed out so hard. She doesn't have to do that same thing here. She just has to do what she just did, which is make Joe Biden actually have a memory and remember something, which I don't know how you'd forget the death of your son, right? Like, I'm kind of picking on him a little bit, but I am incredibly sensitive to the fact that, Joe Biden's been through a lot. Like, say whatever you want about the guy. He's been through a lot. And she does a good job here of making us empathize with him. She just does. Okay, she just does. And then I want to show this other part from whenever she accepted the nomination last night. What's funny is I was kind of waiting to do this video until she gave her speech at the DNC, which is fine. I gave her more respect than Michelle Obama did because she recorded her speech for the DNC before Harris had even been announced. Okay, whatever, that's fine. But let's look at how does she, again, we're thinking about cheerleading and appearing non-threatening to the average voter, how does she do here?
So we're at an inflection point. The constant chaos leaves us adrift. The incompetence makes us feel afraid. The callousness makes us feel alone. It's a lot. And here's the thing. We can do better and deserve so much more. We must elect a president who will bring something different, something better, and do the important work. A president who will bring all of us together, Black, white, Latino, Asian, Indigenous, to achieve the future we collectively want. We must elect Joe Biden.
Now, what I will say is, it's not a very flattering thing for me to pause on. That last part, we must elect Joe Biden, I don't buy that. But the part before that, where she says, here's the thing, like, we can do better. That's all. This is, if you take away nothing else, take away this. That's all she has to convince the undecided voters of. Take the way that the legacy media and a lot of the online space has cultivated this sense of chaos from the Trump administration. I'm not saying that it's totally unfounded, that Donald Trump doesn't in some ways sow some seeds of chaos. Of course he does. He's a polarizing figure, but the vast majority of it is completely ginned up crap from the legacy media that makes, Russia collusion for 2 years. For 2 years, the president's a Russian asset. And then it's like, oh, I guess not. Next story. Like, what? So, like, I understand that the part of the reason why I'm so pessimistic is because of the legacy media. Okay. So don't get me wrong, but all she has to do is further stoke this idea of it's been chaos, guys. Hasn't it been chaos? Don't you have this general sense of chaos? Like all of these things, like, oh, and isn't it, there's all this uncertainty and all this incompetence, what have we seen in the media over the last, I guess since March is, the bungled coronavirus. Everything's been the bungled coronavirus response. And I'm not saying that the US's response was perfect, but to say that the US bungled it generally, but also people like Andrew Cuomo or Gretchen Whitmer, or anyone like that, did so amazing is complete insanity. So, but that's what we've seen in the media a lot. And so all Kamala Harris has to do is just lean into that and say, man, hasn't it felt so chaotic? Like, hasn't it been, there's this general sense of uncertainty. Like, we can do better. We have to elect something better. And Joe Biden is that better. Now, she has to work on that delivery there, but the groundwork has been laid for the chaos and the incompetency thing. And I think she ended with the callousness part for a reason. I think this is a well-crafted message, because even if the chaos and the incompetency thing is something where you're like, well, I don't, the callousness part, like, I think people do generally have a sense that Donald Trump is not, like, even if you don't think he's callous, like most people also wouldn't say he's this warm, cuddly, fuzzy guy. I mean, he can punch, he's a hitter. And that's why he was elected in the first place was, as I've come to realize, is that people on the right were sick of just getting trampled on and, being called things like a basket of deplorables, for so long. And so they said, let's get someone in here who can punch back. Good, bad, or neutral. I think that is a big reason why he was elected. And so I think that the callousness one is people would go, okay, yeah. And then that helps them buy into the incompetency and the chaos thing, which both sides share a lot of the blame for those things. But the idea that there is this general sense of chaos and incompetency, I think that most of that comes from the way this has been portrayed more than is actually true. I think there are certain things that both sides will say about each other all the time, no matter who's actually in power. Mike Pence did that. In all fairness, another part of the clip that at the very beginning of that with interview with Ben Shapiro that I didn't include is he's like, this just proves again that Joe Biden is a radical leftist, and all he cares about is open borders and all these other things and this radical left agenda. And I'm like, Joe Biden is not a radical leftist. Again, he doesn't believe in anything, so he'll be influenced by those people. So maybe that's just as bad. But that's something that tells me that they would have said that no matter what. Just like people on the left will say about the right, no matter what, no matter who was president over the last 4 years, they would have said it was all chaos and they're callous and also other things and they're incompetent. And so these attacks are going to happen no matter what. But my point is that if you look at how where most voters are, this is actually pretty effective. And by most voters, I mean most undecided voters. And here's the real message of where the Democratic Party is right now, and the real message of what Harris and Biden have to lean into and put forth. This is from Stephen Colbert's Late Show. Stephen Colbert is terrible. I don't like Stephen Colbert, but this montage and the way he's been covering the DNC, I think is telling for what the actual agenda is here. So again, they don't have to have a real policy. They don't have to have a real plan, a real agenda, a real platform. They don't have to be, distinctively principled in any ways. They just have to appear to be not chaos, not incompetent, not calloused, because that's what Donald Trump is. And look at this. I think this is astounding. I think this tells you everything you need to know about the message that the Democrats are trying to put forward right now.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to A Late Show. I am your host, Stephen Colbert. The emotions are running high, I gotta say. It's night 3 of the Democratic National Convention, and once again, we are live all this week. We're bringing you every Zoom-tastic moment in a 4-night mega event we're calling
Democrats assemble. Are you fired up?
And so we fight. It is what it is.
I am Kasich.
So, you know, they portray, you know, it's like the end fight scene from Avengers Endgame when all of the Democrats get together to fight, you know, Donald Trump, who's portrayed as Thanos, right? But this is perfectly, you know, right in line with the way that this administration has been portrayed from the beginning, which, you know, it's racist, homophobic, Nazis, you know, keeping kids in cages at the border, all these other things. And so, of course, you know, this is the end game. This is the fight of our lives because, you know, the president is the same as someone who's trying to commit an intergalactic genocide. But what's really fascinating, I hadn't thought about this the first few times I watched this when I was preparing for this video, but they start with Joe Biden saying, Democrats assemble. And then, you know, they have all the different people that they show, but they have Barack Obama, then it's Barack Obama. And then the last Democrat that they show there of let's fight, who's, you know, the real hero of this is Kamala Harris. So they're even acknowledging Joe Biden is an afterthought here. He's the one who, you know, says Democrats assemble, but then all the rest of them are the ones who are really more important because, you know, the former president is featured after him and the VP is the last one. So anyway, but that shows you what their real message is. And listen to what Colbert says here. This is just another few seconds, but I think it's fascinating and also ridiculous.
Every night of the DNC has had a theme. Monday was We the People. Tuesday was Leadership Matters. And tonight was A More Perfect Union.
Well, no, they have had a theme every night, but every night is we're not President Trump. We're not President Trump. We're not President Trump. And also, night 4, hey, just so you know, we're not President Trump. That's the theme. I mean, you got it right there. That it's all of us uniting against Thanos as President Trump. And going back to Kamala Harris and just the general kind of feeling you have to get from her and Joe Biden in order for it to be successful is that contrast is, hey, he's chaos, he's incompetent, he's calloused. We're not that. We just deserve something better. We just need something better. And honestly, whenever I hear her say that, like, we could do better. We need better. I agree. Now, I'm not thinking the same thing she's thinking. I'm thinking we need a better political class. Our institutions need to not suck. We need a news media that's more interested in giving us facts than they are, you know, catering to their base and just getting them pissed off at the other group and just, you know, profiting off of us hating each other. You know, I think we do need better. And so I agree with her when she says that, but I'm not thinking Joe Biden represents that. But that's all she has to do is say, hey, don't things kind of suck right now? Well, it'd be better than it does now with us. You know, there's actually, I think it's a Facebook page or a Twitter account that says settle for Biden. It's got like millions of people following it because that's what people are going to do. And the data bears that out. So here's a Pew Research poll from, I believe they conducted this at the end of July through the beginning of August. And if you look at this, so top reasons for voting for Biden among his supporters, all right? So 56% of registered voters who support Biden and those who lean towards supporting him say their main reason for supporting him is that he's not Trump. Only 19% of Trump supporters cite opposition to Biden as a central motivation. So it's crazy, dude. I mean, if you look at like there are different reasons people give as their number one reason for voting for Trump, you know, 23% say leadership and performance compared to 19% for Joe Biden leadership and performance. So, you know, there's not a huge difference there, but the overwhelming amount for Joe Biden is 56% say he's not Trump. And then you have another 7% say that he, you know, they're just voting for the Democrat and against the Republicans. So that's a solid 63% of people who are planning to vote for Joe Biden or leaning towards voting for Joe Biden are just there because of that contrast, because of how successful the legacy media has been in portraying this has been all about chaos and corruption and collusion and all this other stuff. Like, and honestly, Trump feeds that sometimes. He does. Now, the times that he would offset that with unifying messages and does things that are good don't get covered. They just don't. So, you know, that sucks. So I'm not saying that the way he feeds the chaos is greater than the amount of, you know, good things he does or the good things he says. I think I could reference you back to that speech he did at the Mount Rushmore to show about how even when he says things that are just totally non-controversial good things, it's still going to be portrayed negatively. You know, one thing I've said is that I think that there's a lot of people in the media and a lot of people in the tech industry like Google, Twitter, Facebook, who blame themselves for 2016 for not taking him seriously as a candidate, for treating him like a decent human being. You know, I'm not saying he is, you know, is or isn't a decent human being, but not treating him like a human being, you know, or the fact that they did that. You know, he was on Jimmy Fallon's show and Jimmy Fallon ruffled his hair, had a humanizing moment, and Fallon's, you know, ratings have went down since, and he's had to apologize. He's had to apologize for that. And so, you know, I think that there's a lot of them that blame themselves for, you know, not being partisan hacks or not as much partisan hacks during the 2016 election. And they are committed to not making the, you know, quote, same mistakes again. And so that's where we get the Russian collusion and, you know, all of this dishonest portrayal about stuff with coronavirus and so on and so forth, the stuff with Brett Kavanaugh. Oh, by the way, the Brett Kavanaugh stuff. Kamala Harris was terrible to Brett Kavanaugh during the Kavanaugh hearings, but, you know, I don't think that that's going to be an effective criticism against her as well, because the people who go, yes, she treated Brett Kavanaugh poorly, are most likely people who are already going to vote Republican. They have to find a way to appeal to people who are in that, like, he's not Trump, and have to look at, okay, what are the reasons why they want someone who isn't Donald Trump, and address those people. And so that's my point here, is that Kamala Harris is not as bad a pick as I thought she was. I wish she was as bad, but I don't think she is. And if you think I'm wrong, please, you know, let me know in the comments, message me, because I'm open to that. I'm open to that. But here's one thing that I'll say, and I will leave it here, is I have to reference this. So I wrote this in February, at the very beginning of February. I posted it on Dave Rubin's Locals site, and it was, you know, kind of my general assessment of where the campaign or where the election was going to be at. So this is still during the primaries. And David just interviewed Bridget Fedesi, who also has a Locals community. They're both fantastic communities. I'd suggest you go and join them. Also join mine. But anyway, he had interviewed her, and Bridget Fedesi is a comedian. She used to write for Playboy. She's, you know, she calls herself, you know, kind of a homeless, you know, disaffected person who has no tribe. Basically, she politically has no tribe. She's politically homeless because she feels forced out by the left, but she doesn't, you know, want to go over to the right. And in the interview she did with Dave, she said, you know, I can't bring myself to vote for Trump, but I also can't vote for these Democrats. You know, I'm not excited about the current slate of candidates here, which was right. If you look at the primaries, there's no one that anyone is excited about, really. You know, Bernie Sanders is the closest you're going to get, and the DNC shut that down quick, fast, and in a hurry, like they tend to do with Bernie Sanders. But this is one of the things I said here, and I think this kind of speaks to this moment and speaks to that, you know, 56% who say, well, he's not Trump. So what I wrote, again, this is in February, beginning of February. Tell me this is not, you know, a little bit of clairvoyancy. It seems more likely to come down to the large number of unmotivated voters, some on the right, but mostly on the left. Based on Dave's last interview with Bridget Fedesi, she seems to encompass what many in the middle / disaffected left are feeling. Quote, I can't bring myself to vote for Trump, but I'm not enthusiastic for the current Democrats either. If my assessment is accurate, which low voter turnout in Iowa supports this, though anecdotally, then one way to look at this is from the standpoint of Trump not motivating those who are not yet motivated enough to vote against him. So what I was saying is that there are all these people who I think were probably never going to vote for him, but also weren't motivated enough to go out and vote against him either. And so that what Trump needed to do was find a way to keep those people unmotivated for voting, from voting against him, because there was low voter turnout for the Democrats in 2016. That's one of the reasons why Hillary lost. There are all these places that Obama won handily against Mitt Romney, and that Donald Trump won in 2016 because the turnout was so low for Democrats. And what I continue on. As Shapiro says, all of Trump's flaws are baked into the cake at this point. And on one level, Ben is right. But consider this. Those of you in relationships are acutely aware of your significant other's flaws and the little things they do that piss you off. Yet the recency, magnitude, and combination with other flaws directly impacts how you're feeling that day, week, etc. It's the difference between we've been fighting lately and things are pretty good right now. Ben is right that most people have the people have mostly priced in Trump's flaws. But come November, if he starts going out for beers after work every night, keeps forgetting to pick up the kids, or is just kind of being a douche, then there are a lot of Americans who will adopt the we're fighting perspective. Those who didn't have enough of a reason to get out and vote against Trump might suddenly find themselves with one. And that's where I think we're at now. Listen to this next thing that I wrote. Again, maybe this is me tooting my own horn a little bit here. I don't know. But this is incredible. Beginning of February. The point is, there's likely to be black swans lying ahead. There are things that could still happen that will turn apathy into activation. Those are things I want to start looking for. Additionally, the Democrat candidate field is weak. Despite all that weakness, it will still be a close election in November. That's right, November. There's a hell of a lot of time for things to happen that would activate those I mentioned. And then I go into an example of in World War Z, it was a zombie movie. They go to Jerusalem and there is a wall that they built to keep the zombies out in Jerusalem. And Brad Pitt interviews this guy who is the 10th man. So that, I guess, they said the Knesset had this thing called the 10th man rule, which was if all 9 of them agree on something, or all 10 of them agree on something, it's the 10th man's job to make an argument for the other side. And one of the reasons why I wrote this was because I said there are all these people talking about how things look super good for Donald Trump right now. And, this is the beginning of February. He's going to beat this, the impeachment, and the economy was doing great. And there are all these people saying, no matter who the Democrats pick, he's got this in the bag. Like, this is going to be a wash. And I was saying, like, look, I'm trying to be the 10th man here. Like, my point is that something could happen that will activate the apathetic. And so the question I posed then was, what are the black swans? What are the unknown unknowns that will activate the apathetic Dems and the frustrated center-right folks? In other words, how can Trump beat Trump? What circumstances will lead to the Democrats winning? What would the ticket look like? And so, like, I bring that up again, partly because I think it's fascinating that I even used a zombie metaphor there to say, well, we might not be in a World War Z situation, but still, like, there's got to be something lying ahead that's going to activate people. Well, what's activated them? The coronavirus has done just that. And I'm not going full tinfoil hat here and saying this is some manufactured thing. No, of course not. I don't believe that at all. I'm sorry if you do. I don't. But I will say that the media and the Democrats have, it's been perfect for them to seize on something to actually substantiate this chaos and incompetency thing. The incompetency thing, they tried with foreign policy. And, when they moved the embassy to Jerusalem, they said it was going to be, war in the Middle East, and it's going to be terrible and chaos. Well, what just happened with this Middle East peace deal, with the UAE? That's a big deal. That falls flat. The Russia, we're going to, the stuff with North Korea, they remember that was going to be a big thing. We're going to go to war with North Korea. That didn't happen. Trump went and talked to Kim Jong-un. Things with they said that with climate change, we were going to go backwards just because we pulled out the Paris Accords or whatever, which was non-binding anyway. Well, we've continued to have the lowest carbon emissions basically of anywhere. We've been lowering our carbon emissions despite that. So a lot of this, Soleimani, we killed Soleimani, and this is going to be chaos and things are going to be terrible. Crickets. There's a strike against a base that we knew about, and it was just to show that, hey, you guys, and that was it. And so my point is that, they didn't really have much of a leg to stand on with a lot of the arguments, and the chaos a lot of times was ginned up by them in the first place. And so coronavirus has given them that thing that they can say, no, things really are bad. Look at the unemployment, in which I would argue people filing for unemployment is not the same as people that don't have jobs permanently. May's job numbers, and there's a lot of indicators of why that's the case. But my point is they actually have a leg to stand on with a lot of these arguments. So and I'm not even saying that it's accurate, that what they're saying is accurate. You know, again, Donald Trump's not responsible for Andrew Cuomo's handling of nursing homes during the pandemic, you know, and having over 30,000 people dead as a result of it. Obviously, they weren't all from nursing homes, but you know my point. But they can actually portray that. And so that's where you get, like, I'm really curious what this poll would have been in January of like what your reasons are for voting Democrat or for voting for any of these people compared to Donald Trump. That I'm not sure it would have been 56% Trump, 56% saying not Trump. But those apathetic have now become activated. And so back to Kamala Harris, back to Joe Biden. My point is, I guess I'll leave it here. I always say that, and then I launch into some other diatribe, and then I launch into some other point, and then I say, I guess I'll leave it here again, and then rinse and repeat. But I really will leave it here. It's a mistake, and it's naive for us to think that Kamala Harris isn't actually kind of an effective pick because of what she has to do that's different than what she had to do in the primaries. She just has to make Joe Biden likable. She has to get out there and seem non-threatening. She has to be more enthusiastic and more, kind of disarming than Mike Pence and Donald Trump. That's who she's being compared to. And I think that she's going to be able to do that. I think she already can do that effectively. Again, I'm not saying that it's honest. I'm not saying that it's right. But I think that she's actually not as bad a pick as I thought she was. And it'd be naive for us to think that she is. And really, I don't know what the Trump-Pence campaign can do to really effectively combat a lot of these narratives. You know, again, I'm very pessimistic just because of the way the media covers these things. You know, I had one of my screenshots I took about, you know, this DNC stuff it was like 4 different articles or 4 different headlines about how President Obama was going to lay into Donald Trump and give this scathing rebuke and blistering criticism and all this other stuff. And then sandwiched in the middle there was another NBC one that said Trump lashes out in a tweet storm against Obama after he gives his speech. And so, and I think it was Huffington Post, which of course it's Huffington Post, you have to take it with a grain of salt. Huffington Post said, like, Trump proves Obama right. So it's kind of like that thing where it's just, you know, Obama can lay out this blistering, scathing criticism and all this horrible rebuke as per their own words. But if Donald Trump, you know, defends himself and says, that's wrong, you're an ineffective president, well, then, you know, he's the bad guy there. Whenever Obama's criticism was, he doesn't take this seriously, he's incapable of taking this seriously, da-da-da-da-da. So, like, I don't know how they can effectively combat that, but I think that for a huge portion of people in the middle that were probably, you know, going, I just can't, I'm not excited about the Democrats. They needed 2 things. They needed to feel like they were voting for something that wasn't crazy radical and that was going to be, you know, some form of law and order and, you know, not chaos. And I think Kamala Harris and Joe Biden can effectively portray that or put that idea forward with the help of the media. I mean, the way the media are handling this thing, it's going to be really bad, guys, because again, I'm not the first person to point this out, but no side's going to think that the results of this election are legitimate. And a lot of that's going to come down to how the media portrayed this. And actually in that same piece that I wrote, that I shared a part of earlier, I talked about that, of how that the right, because of impeachment and stuff, they'll say that, and the Russia collusion, they'll say that the election results aren't legitimate if Trump loses. And I think the left will say the same thing for, you know, a myriad of other reasons. So what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have to do is just portray that contrast, which they are effectively doing. And the media are just doing all the legwork and talking about, and again, building the case for what a horrible, racist, you know, garbage president this is over the last 4 years. And so I think that they're in trouble. I think Trump and Pence are in trouble. I don't see them winning. As of right now, I don't see them winning. There's some, you know, what I would say is there's some stuff in the polls that tells me that they might not be in as bad a circumstances, I think, but also I think the polls are garbage and I don't trust them. And I don't know why anyone would put any stock in them after what we've seen recently. So anyway, so that's where I'll leave it just something for you guys to think about is, it would be naive for us to think that Trump is in as good a position as it seemed like he could be, and that Harris is as bad a pick as it seemed like she is, because I don't think either of those things are true. And if that's something that is meaningful to you, if you really, really want Biden and Harris to lose, then I think that we have to take that seriously and, find ways to combat that, chaos narrative that they're putting forward, and to talk about, I'm going to make another video talking about, there really is some radical crap that they're catering to. Again, they don't believe it. But you don't have to believe it to put the policy forward. If you don't believe anything, then, and all you care about is getting power, then you're going to cater to whoever you think is going to help you get power, even if that means some crazy policies. I was reading up on one of the economists who was a Bernie Sanders. She was part of his campaign and helped write some of his financial policies, and how she was one of the people that the Sanders campaign sent to help craft some of these policies whenever they got together with Biden's campaign. So the idea that they will try to put forth a radical kind of agenda isn't unfounded. It's not unfounded, but I think that the way you articulate that where people get buy-in is to say, yeah, the problem is that Biden and Harris don't believe anything. Like, I don't think they're radical, but that won't stop them from catering to radicals, which is the exact same outcome. They don't have to be true believers to vote for the ideas of true believers. So anyway, I think that's going to be a more effective strategy if you want to try and speak out and, let people know, hey, this might not be as in the bag as people think it is. Trump might be in worse shape than people think that he is. Anyway, but we'll see. And I'll make a video talking, I want to cover at least or talk about, mention something about how the RNC is covered compared to the DNC, because my guess is it's going to be obviously very skewed. It's going to be different. So, okay, that's it. I appreciate you watching. If this type of thing you're into, please like, share, and subscribe. That's follow me on Twitter. That's at My Mundane Mind. On YouTube at Return to Reason. On my locals page, which is returntoreason.locals.com, I post articles. We can have conversations, and you can post stuff if you have thoughts as well. So I'd really love it if you came over and subscribed over there. You can check me out on Medium or on ThinkSpot. I post written work there as well. And I'm going to start bringing over some of the articles that I wrote that are just basically on Dave Rubin's locals, and I'm going to put those on to like Medium and ThinkSpot and on my locals so that you can see some of the stuff I've written before, because it's just kind of stuck as a post on Dave's locals, which is great. It was good then, but I kind of need an archive of some of those things. So you can check me out there, and then Spotify, my podcasts are uploaded to Spotify as well. And again, if you have any criticisms, if anything I said is something you think that I am, giving, I'm giving the devil his due a little too much here, which is what I'm trying to do. I don't want to be, I was one of the Democrats in 2016 that was totally blindsided by Trump's election. And a lot of people were. And, I'm not, I voted Democrat. I've never registered Democrat. I've always registered as independent, but I always voted Democrat. Something tells me that's going to change in the upcoming election. But my point is that I don't want us to be blindsided by this. And I think there's a lot of people on the right who are going to be blindsided if Trump loses. And I think that we still have some time to try and fight back against some of the things that would cause him to lose. Anyway, but if you think I'm wrong, if you think that I am giving Kamala Harris too much credit or Joe Biden too much credit, then please let me know. I'm always open to criticisms or anything like that. But I think that this is pretty telling right here. 56% just don't want Donald Trump. And that's a problem. And I think a lot of that isn't necessarily Trump's fault. I think there is no positive coverage of the good things that the administration has done or anything good or positive or unifying that he says. So I don't know how to beat that. Like I said, I'm pretty pessimistic about it, to be honest, guys. But if you have some optimism you can share with me, that'd be great too, because I'm not feeling it. Put it that way. I'm not feeling it. So anyway, that's it. One thing to look forward to is Kevin and I recorded a almost 4-hour conversation, and he's currently editing that down into digestible chunks. I do not envy him doing that. He said, do you want to release this in one big thing? I said, we can. I'm not going to edit it, but if you want to, you can. And he is being the hard worker that he is compared to my lazy self. He's breaking it up into digestible chunks. So we're going to be putting that conversation out probably over the next week. as well. And then again, I'll get into some more coverage of some of the election stuff and political stuff. Anyway, all right. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. And I will see you next time. Peace. Okay, peace.